Gawande wrote, there's 13,000 ways the body can fail. And I think he got that from ICD-9, and then ICD-10 came along and defined 68,000 things.
Yeah, but there's a checklist for that.
Yes. Yeah, I really like his writing.
Yeah. So we're going to get underway. I want to thank everyone for joining the People-Centered Internet team call, community call for Sunday, the 13th of February. We have Doug Hohulin with us today. Before we get to an introduction for Doug, I just want to spend a brief moment thanking Chris Page, who has been with us for a very long time as a member of our Guests and Speakers Committee. He's taking a hiatus right now, drilling down on some important business and personal activities. So I just want to thank Chris for his stewardship of this group. And Lynn Wells and I are going to do our very best, right, to help. And Casey Komlowski, who supports Mei Lin, is going to help with technical support for our team. So we thank Chris for all of his great service over the years to PCI. Now, Doug, we're fantastic. Glad to have you with us. You're going to present creating a people-centered metaverse of abundance and opportunity for all. Doug is not an unfamiliar face to us. We've seen Doug on our calls for many months, and I'm not going to try to preempt the content of your presentation, but I will say that you spent a lot of time at Nokia and Motorola. You've spent 33 years in the technology space, helping folks understand and implement, technologies. You're an XR, Web 3D technology and information advisor today for a variety of industries, but you focus on healthcare, education, and transportation, where there are 5G and 6G. I don't know. I know what 6G is. All right. So you hope you tell us about 6G. Maybe it's like the number of razor blades, right? That, they keep on saying, if it's not 3 blades aren't good enough, we need 4, 5, 12 blades to shave. So we'll see what 6G is. And we're looking forward to having your presentation and sharing more about your background and how we can navigate this in a way that the metaverse ends up being our friend. So, Doug, take it away.
Well, thank you so much for the kind introduction. Let me share my screen. Can you see that's okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect.
If anyone has questions, put them into chat. We'll be getting to questions after the main presentation, and then we'll have overtime as usual.
Well, thank you so much. Well, so I'm going to be talking about people-centered metaverse, and I really appreciate this organization, People-Centered Internet, and how it's focused on people, and something I really care about as well. And I go in the metaverse and virtual reality by Surfer Doug. I like to wake surf, and so I think of myself. I enjoy surfing both the physical and the digital world. Surfing the internet, being a tech scout, looking at technology and scouting what technology is coming along and helping people understand technology. My dad was a history teacher, high school history teacher, and so I have a passion for history, even though I'm a technologist. So the internet, the metaverse, what is it? There's lots of words for it right now. Alvin Grayland, if you want to follow someone who has great content, I would recommend him. And he's he was born in China, then went to the United States, and now he's president of HTC China. But he talks about the metaverse being internet plus 3D plus VR. And when I talked to him, I said, well, let's add 5G, 6G. the cloud, AI, and digital twin. And, so what is this? What is the metaverse? And by the way, he gives this talk in Chinese as well. And, I thought it's interesting not only how the United people in the West viewed the internet, but people in the East and around the world. So, how the Chinese look at it is, the initial or the beginning character of the universe. And so how do we think about this? Confucius says the beginning of wisdom is calling things by their proper name. And I think we're going to get a lot of different names for whatever the internet will be in 2030. So it's kind of like, you ask, well, what is 6G? Well, 6G is whatever communication is in 2030. And so, the metaverse is really whatever, by 2030, we'll look back and say, okay, that was, whether we call it the metaverse or some other name, omniverse, spatial web, or immersive technology, whatever we're going to call this by 2030, that's what the metaverse is going to be. I'm getting feedback from one person. I don't know if they want to be muted. But anyway, so, the new technology has many names until it gets accepted by the average consumer. We went from wireless phones, cell phones, cellular phones. Now we're in smartphones, horseless carriages, and so forth. So the metaverse, I actually like spatial web. I like Web 3D. But since that's what people are calling it, I'll call it the metaverse. And Kathy Hackle, who's another person great to follow, she wrote a book, The Augmented Workforce, How Artificial Intelligence, Augmented Reality, 5G will impact every dollar you make. It's a great book. She's coming out with another book on the metaverse. So I think of the metaverse as going to be a big bang, Cambrian explosion of technology. So, the metaverse, has this, it wasn't very, focused, the name of it. And then all of a sudden there's this explosion talking about the big bang of technology on, that the 160 filings on the SEC in 2021 had the metaverse. So this is huge number, what this technology is going to be. Leslie Shannon, who from Nokia, she's a tech scout, and she had this slide talking about the spatial web and what is this technology. So we're still trying to figure out, what the internet of 2030 is going to be, the spatial web, this metaverse. Here's all the different buzzwords that's being used. So I go back to the 1D, the one-dimensional world of computing. It was for the 30 years. This is my mom actually was a key punch operator. And so this was her world for 30 years. And so the question is just like how my mom, is just experienced, she's now 85, this, the 2D world of the internet, what will the world of 3D look like? This is going to be this interesting world that is kind of hard to imagine. So we're just going to peer into this a little bit. Mary Meeker showed this slide in 2013, and just wanted to highlight it, where she talked about the generations of technology, just like you have in communication. We're now 5G communication. She talks about these computing generations, and for the first three kind of generations, it was 1D. Then the next three three decades, it was 2D. And now, I added in red the smart glasses, this metaverse computing of what 3D is going to begin, and that's going to be in the 2020s, going to 2030s and 2040s will just be as incredible as living in the mainframe world of the 60s. So it's just going to be an incredible opportunity. And so the question is, how can we have abundance for all? How we can have a people-centered metaverse? So focusing on people-centered, we have these generations and how each of these generations view the metaverse, this technology, how to make it less complicated, how to make it more immersive, more abundant for everyone, I think is very important. By the way, rather than alpha generations, I'm trying to get people to call it the boomers or the generation V. For virtual generation, going from digital native to virtual native. So Alvin Graylin, I got permission to use his slides, great content. He talks about the metaverse expands, not replaces the internet. And, a couple comments on his slide here is, instead of following likes and collections, you collect memories and friendships. It's instead of text-based or audio-based, video-based, it's 3D-based. And, we live as humans in a physical world of three dimensions. So spatial videos, how we look at our world is very 3D based. And so that's why I like Web 3D or Spatial Web. But I'll call it whatever the terminology people want to use. So instead of PCs, tablets, the devices, we're going to have VR devices, XR devices, MR devices, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Going from screens of 2D, mouse touch, to this full natural user interfaces. So, my question is, in my mind, is when can I give this device to my mom? I put her in VR last year for the first time, but when can I put her in? And it's just natural, right? And my guess is by 2025, that's going to be the case, that I can just give her this device and it just works for her. She'll be about 90 by then, or 88. So anyway, it's going to be an interesting, how do we collect these memories? How do we collect friendships? How do we engage with our fellow man around the world? And so these are things I'm excited about. So, coming from Nokia and Motorola, devices is very important. So right now, people, this is worldwide. A good site to follow is We Are Social. And so following where, how people use devices. And so, whether it's smartphone, feature phones, computers, laptops, and so forth, that's going to be very important. So, the question is then, on this people-centered, how do we use devices today? What is it going to be devices we're going to be engaging with in the 2030s? Here's an example, a similar device ownership, but from a US perspective. So there's 300 slides on We Are Social that they publish, on how people use social media and so forth. So these are a few of the slides to highlight as well. So right now, worldwide, we're about 4.8% of people using VR devices. And the question, so the majority of it is smartphone or laptops is what people's using today, though there's game consoles and other types of devices being used. So there's the type of devices out there, and then there's how we spend our time with media. And so on average, about 7 hours are spent with using the internet, looking at either broadcast television streaming or broadcast, looking at social media, reading books, listening to music, listening to radio, podcasts, and gaming. So these are kind of how does our world engage with this technology. Since we only have 24 hours a day and we should be sleeping at least 8 hours, plus we figure at least 1 hour for grooming and eating. So, we're going to be running out of hours to spend on the internet. And, what does it mean for being people-centered metaverse, people-centered internet in this world of all this immersive technology that's available today and going to be even expanding in the future? So again, here's the trends from 2013 to 2021. Again, you're around 7 hours right now on average. Again, because we're, that's basically, if you take away sleeping, there's not much more time to have for engaging on the internet. And what there's a trend, I think of the 2010s as when mobile became the primary means of the internet. So, we went from, in 2013 to 27% of the time we use our internet using mobile, now to over 50%. And so what does that mean then for the future of how people use the internet? I like this slide from IDC because it really showed how from the pandemic's perspective, how people changed the usage of devices and engage with the internet. So, this is the weekly number, but according to this statistic, and I think it's self-reporting. So, you can self-report yourself. I think it's a little bit high, but again, it's a data point of how people think of how they use the internet. It went 20% total increase, and how people use it at home was 44% because there was a lot more working from home, remote working, so not going into the office as well. So what will those trends continue now that it looks like COVID is kind of, hopefully we'll get back to the new normal in 2022. What does that mean going forward in this decade of how we interact both, totally as well as in home engagement? Then what is our favorite device? I like this slide from IDC as well. They looked at PC, tablets, and smartphones. And, I think it's over 200 times people get a cell phone out of their pocket every day. to do some kind of engagement. So, do they engage more on the PC, on the tablet, on the smartphones? And this is how people would self-report themselves as well. So, gaming is a big area. I mean, that's in the news. It's bigger than the movie theater industry, the television industry. So how do people live in the gaming world, and what kind of devices do they use? So I like this, this slide because it highlights that, mobile took over in the 2010s. Now it's over 50% of the gaming world. And, now you're seeing this VR and cloud that's starting to come up, but, it's just starting, so, but how will it change in the 2020s, and what will happen by 2030 for this immersive technology to take off? So, Alvin Grayland showed this slide, just talking about this immersive technology, because if you ever use the VR, here's a 1.2 pounds device. It's kind of after 30 minutes, even if you're really into the XR technology, gets kind of hard to wear. This is like 0.35, 185 grams. The device, there's a lot. I could wear this for hours. But it's an HTC device called the Flow. But eventually you're going to get to like 86 grams, 0.19 pounds. So basically, like, you just put on your pair of glasses. Today you have a cable, but in the future it's going to be wireless. But then once you have these devices, how will people engage and be immersed in this technology? And so HTC has actually been looking at this immersive technology, and are we being more immersed from a gaming perspective? Is it addictive? How do we interact? Is it going to be immersive learning where we learn better, or will immersive education, or will be immersive addictions of games, and where people just stay in the metaverse all the time? And so from a people-centered metaverse perspective, I mean, we don't live in an isolated world. We want to live in an engaging world. So the other thing is this hyper reality, where all this information is bombarding. If you go to this YouTube channel, I won't show it now, but in fact, here it is. One of the screenshots of this is where all this information on your smart glasses come in, and you can see sales, you can say weight loss, information, your shopping list. So what is this hyper reality of all this information flowing at you? So, this is a video that came out talking about hyper reality a few years ago. Very interesting to watch. I'll put it in the chat. But a world of information overload. So there's going to be a great need to filter this information. Kevin Kelly talks about that a lot. Actually, the Future Today Institute Tech Trends report by Amy Webb's group talks about diminished reality. So you diminish the information flowing to you. So what are the 5 things you need to know today, or this moment, and how do you diminish everything else that's out of there? I actually like the concept of consonance reality. So a world of calmness when you need, but a world of information, learning, work, entertainment, excitement, ecstasy, and joy when desired. How do we harmonize these things so that, when we have all this information, these QR codes coming to us, the AI filters all this information to minimize this information overload. So it calms you as opposed to it makes you hyper. So I don't want to live in a hyper reality world of this technology. So, I like this quote from Helen Keller, and to paraphrase what she said, if gaming, metaverse, or social media becomes addictive, it can drive a person to live in a world that is no world, unconscious yet unconscious of time, of nothingness, as you scroll through your personal media posts, not connecting with friends or family, having no power of thoughts. And what Helen Keller gave in her quote, and actually gave the full quote, she said, it was something I began to think. It was the awakening of my soul that first rendered my senses their value, that made me conscious of love, joy, and all the positive emotions. I was eager to know, then to understand afterwards, to reflect on what I knew and understood. So it's really about connections. And in fact, if you're not connecting with people in the internet and making meaningful connections, or if you're not in the metaverse making these meaningful connections, like what we're doing today, I believe, people-centered internet is about making meaningful connections. And so, can we waken our souls of humanity to render our senses their value? right? What are the positive emotions that we can have? So I think this is a very important quote to consider as we think about what the metaverse is doing. So, I call this the golden metaverse mean, balancing the physical and digital virtual worlds, not socially isolating ourselves. You can do that physically as well as in the virtual world. But if you're not engaging with meaningful connections, you have a 30% risk of dying in 7 years. So how do we balance learning, working, playing, connecting with people, both in the physical world? So these are going to be the challenges of our 2020s as we have more immersive technology. So, one thing I think about is how can I use this technology to benefit others and not just myself? The exercise for the soul is to help another person. That's kind of how I think about it. So in 1969 is two small steps for man, two giant leaps for mankind. So the moon landing, of course, we're people-centered internet. So, the first internet connection was in October of 69 as well. So two big bangs of technology, but for a long time, not much has changed. All of a sudden TCP/IP came along in the early 90s, and all of a sudden this technology explosion of the internet. And so will this be a new technology explosion? Will it be a Cambrian explosion of technology in the 2020s as we go from the 2D world to the 3D world of technology? The Alliance for Telecommunication Industry Association is the US standards body. And then there's other standards bodies in China and Europe and so forth. But they talk about, what you ask about 5G, what is 5G? Well, 5G is whatever communication is in 2020 or 2030. The metaverse is whatever the internet is in the 2030 kind of time frame. And so you have the devices, you have the networks, and then you have the applications riding upon it. I gave a presentation and been writing a living blog, talking about the 21st century. It's the century of the billion and billions. In 1802, we had 1 billion humans on the planet. In 2002, we had 1 billion cell phones on the world. And 1 billion PCs were in 2008, 1 billion vehicles in 2010. So it seems like all of a sudden we're getting 1 billion of things in this 21st century that we're in. And, I've lived in the cell phone world for the last, 33 years. And so what with this explosion of this technology, what's going to be the impact on the future of humanity? You'll have wearables, you'll have 5G, 1 billion, you'll have cryptocurrency, you'll have these digital twins. I'm predicting there'll be 1 billion people interacting with the metaverse by 2027. Once we do that, like in 2011, we had 1 billion people using smartphones. And now, there's 6.2 billion smartphone connections in the world, about 5 billion actual people using it. Like I have 2 or 3 smartphones in my house right now for myself personally, plus tablets and so forth. 4 hours and 48 minutes on average, people are using these smartphones for various reasons. So there's going to be this explosion of technology for the first billion. And then how do we have this abundance for all? So it's not just the first billion, but the total, the world population. Like there's 1 billion students. How can we get them to have 25 megabits or greater? How can telelearning and so forth. So these are the technologies I'm interested in. What's going to change that? What's going to be very meaningful is that we will, right now, these devices, as I mentioned before, are clunky. But, in the next 5 years to 10 years, this is a Qualcomm slide, we will have, lightweight devices, like over 70% of people wear glasses. So can we have this technology that, just very natural, that this information, and then have, this diminished reality or consonance reality where you only get the information you need when you need it. So, the global trends of, last year, or 2020, I thought this was interesting because, as you can see, the number of headsets actually went down. That's because people got into 2017, saw these, cardboard VR devices. They were clunky. And so then they went down, and now they're starting to grow. And this will continue to grow and grow. So the question is are we past the, the virtual reality desert, or will, there be another clunkiness before it really takes off in the 2025 timeframes? I think we passed that. I think it will continue to grow incrementally, but we'll see. Chemo, this is a really good presentation for Ren's. Great content around learning, but he has this slide that talks about the market size in billions, and where there's just going to be this 10 times growth from 2021 to 2024. Again, because of the Qualcomm slide where the devices get smaller, you get cloud computing. And you get the 5G effect, so an AI effect. So, there's value in doing this, and both from a personal perspective and a corporate perspective. So Alvin Grayland talks about, the screen, how we interact with screens. Right now, we're kind of at peak screens. But, I don't want 20 screens around my life. I want one screen that shows me the information I want when I want to see it. And so how does AI help with that? How do I get this information that gives me some value? So I'll skip through some of these slides. This is kind of for a longer presentation, but since we only have, I've only speak for another 10 minutes and then open up for questions. But I did talk about AI, and one thing the track is not only around XR and the devices, but it's around AI, what information is coming, how do you value the information so that you don't get overwhelmed with this hyper reality. So AI is going to be coming. It's going to be part of the XR technology, the Metaverse technology that's coming along. Then you have 5G coming along. Right now, this is the economic impact of 5G. We're right now at around $2 trillion. It's expected that there's going to be about 14 trillion, both in manufacturing, retail, and so forth. And that, along with XR and AI, will just have this explosion of economic and hopefully abundance for everyone. So, right now there's about a little bit over about 700 million people using 5G technology, expected to be up at the 3 billion. And with that technology, with 5G, you also get the AI of the device. And so it's kind of like this perfect storm of technology. So that's why 2025 is going to be very interesting. And then there's going to be, that's when we're going to get to the 2027 timeframe, where 1 billion people, instead of watching this on a screen, like on your laptop, you will be looking at this in XR technology, a Metaverse technology is what you'll be looking at in the future. So I wanted to highlight this screen. It came from Dr. Soledani. He used to work for Nokia, then went to Huawei, and now is at Rakuten. And he talks about 5G XR and the applications. And so, like right now we're in this phase 1 of technology, 100 megabits of data, but very quickly we're going to be in the gigabit speeds. We're going from, the speed latencies from 20 milliseconds down to 5 milliseconds, high reliability as well. So this is the technology from a network perspective that's being built out to support the Metaverse devices that will be out there. So that's going to be very important. One comment, I'm very passionate about how do we minimize our carbon footprint and toxic waste in this world. One piece of information is 2% of e-waste is in the landfill, but 70% of toxic waste. So one thing, if you want to be green, is don't throw away anything digital in your trash. Get it recycled, because 70% of that toxic waste will go there. And, I look at this curve from, 1 trillion devices, kind of by the early 2030s, and this e-waste that's going to be happening. I don't even think this takes into account, solar panels as well. So I am very concerned about e-waste. And so how do we minimize that as well? So, transportation, 45% of transportation is San Francisco is for greenhouse gases is from traveling. And so, I talk about the greenness, and the safest mile you can travel is by traveling virtually. So it's something to consider. As we think of things, South Bank talks about 10 trillion things by 2040, and what will be in the world. And the question is how do we go from, all these things out there? Cisco talked a while back of by 2020 there will be 1.8 trillion things. Well, if you look at what SoftBank talked about, we're talking about by 2040 we'll have 20 trillion things out there, maybe 10 trillion of them connected to the internet, right? And so how do we have this avalanche of all these things out there? And so we're people-centered internet, people-centered society. I really like Dr. Martin Luther King's quote that, if we're going to get on the right side of this world revolution of this technology, as technologists, we need to undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly shift from being a things-oriented society to a person-centered society. So I really agree with his message here. And how do we have a people-centered society? And I think our group here, this adds value to that. Peter Diamandis, I paraphrase one of his quotes: if we're going to get to net carbon zero in 20 years, we're going to have to look back to the days when we commute to the office only to work at a desk, or to school to only be bored all day, as somewhat of an insane practice. So how do we have use immersive technology for good and not for bad, will be our challenge for the 2020s as well. So, how do we use some of this technology? One area, I'm actually an advisor for Brand Lab Fashion. It's a virtual reality platform for shopping and for retail. And I like this slide from Qualcomm that says, shop like never before. So what happens when you go from, shopping in the physical world to shopping in the virtual world? And you can try to minimize your waste. The sad thing is that 40% of clothes are never worn. And I joke that 100% of clothes that your aunt gives you are never worn. And if the trends continue in fashion and apparel, that a quarter of the Earth's climate budget will be from this apparel industry. So we need to be much more efficient in how we travel, how we buy things, so that we become people-centered and not things-centered. And so this will be our challenge for today. The other area is education. How do we focus on being more creative and skills-based? Elon Musk said, I hated going to school when I was a kid. It was tortured. So I think of, if we do not create students that want to be lifelong learners, but consider learning torture, then we're doing education wrong. So how do we focus on education that's immersive and kind of this gamification of education? I think that will be coming in the 2020s as well. Connecting the unconnected is really important. Unfortunately, 2/3 of school children have no internet at home. If you look at, where there's 4G, now only 5G, this was a year old, but, kind of shows you that in Africa and Asia and a lot of places, they're really struggling with connectivity. And so how do we do that? Even in the United States, there's maybe 19.4 million children, and the households don't have internet at broadband speeds per IBM. So how do this will be rolled out, and the U.S. government is getting $65 billion as part of the stimulus and the bills, the different funding that they came out with. So this is, we're spending money. Hopefully we'll get the students connected more efficiently so they can have more educational experiences as well. I've worked on various projects on healthcare as well. Since we're running out of time, I will just, kind of talk the last couple minutes, focusing on, how do we, as companies, because many of us work in companies, how do we merging the real and virtual worlds together? Actually, Accenture is doing a lot of very interesting work around this. They talk about building a 3-year roadmap. I would say even a 5-year roadmap of this technology. I mean, if you buy a lot of devices today, the Quests, they'll be obsolete in 2 years. So, how do you invest today to be prepared for this technology in the 2025s to the 2027s? I was part of the Nokia Center of Excellence, XR Center of Excellence group, where we're trying to build, how do we roll out this technology? I've been working right now with universities on this rollout of this technology as well. So Alvin Graylin talks about, what is the coming decade of this metaverse, where he talks about XR devices revenue will exceed cell phone revenue. And, where we have more data on the metaverse than on 2D mobile devices as well. He talks about countries being leapfrogged first world in mass adoption with this technology as well. And more billionaires are going to be created with the metaverse than the internet. He did talk about, he has a good view of having, understanding China and the West. And he thinks that China is likely to be full metaverse experience first. So what does that mean for the West as well? By the way, 70% of devices being bought in China is for enterprise, making money, while only 30% in the West is that case. So how do we look at that? The metaverse removes geographic boundaries. I'm part of a number of groups that we're working with people all around the world. This group as one of them, a good example. And so how we do that? Also, how to help minimize the impact of greenhouse gas emissions to improve the climate crisis. So these are the technologies we're going to be looking at in the next 10 years. So in conclusion, the cell phone and smartphones brought internet connectivity to everyone in the 2000s and 2010s. This metaverse is going to have, this much disruption in the 2020s as that disruption we had in the last 20 years. Right now, if you get into this, I don't know how many of you, in fact, will raise our hands after I give this talk, how many people have been in, use a Quest or an XR technology. Right now it's still clunky to use. If I need to spend a lot of time to get my mom into this. I'm looking forward to when I can just give her, just like I gave her an iPhone and just work for her, when she can do the same thing with the XR technology, this metaverse technology. But I do believe in the next 10 years, we'll have these smart glasses of sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, sensations that will replace the smartphone, for this fully immersive experience that's indistinguishable from the physical world. As we go from the smart phone age to the smart glasses age, this universe, metaverse of opportunity. So, you asked a question about what is 6G. I actually gave my first public presentation on 5G in 2015. I started working on it in around 2011. With 6G, I started doing some things in 2020 with 6G and gave a couple presentations in 2020. I expect in 2028, I'll give my first 7G presentation. What is that? And so, how I look at, 5G, to the layperson, I would say is where voice is mostly too cheap to meter in the 2010s, right? We had unlimited voice phone calls. Now with 5G, you're basically getting unlimited data for most applications in the 2020. 6G is around AI and too cheap to meter and connecting around the world, the unconnected. So that's areas that are being focused on. There's 5G advanced and then 6G, but there's like 6 different areas of 6G that are being focused on. I have a different presentation on 6G if you're interested, but that's what 6G is. And then 7G, I think of this as abundance and reality. This virtual reality, this physical reality is too cheap to meter and imagine. So that's the world I hope we can have, a world of people-centered technology and connections around the world is something I'm very passionate about. So, when I give talks to students, especially in Kansas, where I'm from, our great seal is ad astra per aspera. To the stars through difficulty. I add vel technologias, or to technology, because going to the stars makes technology so much easier. So how do we use technology to be people-centered and to help and provide abundance for all? So that's what I'm trying to focus on, and I look forward to sharing this vision and discussing this with you now for questions and answers. So thank you.
Doug, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate your unpacking so much in so little time. We have, an interesting discussion going on in background in chat, and one of our vibrant contributors in chat is Guy Huntington. Guy, you ought to kick this off. You have a lot to say about what Doug said. Some agreements, some amplifications.
Hi, Doug. I really liked your presentation. It's top drawer. It's really good technically, but I think you missed out one of the big boondoggles, which is laws and regulations, because the tech is so far ahead. We're on a very small, shrinking planet, yet we all pretend we're going to handle this all in our little jurisdiction and everything will be copacetic. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like right now, cryptocurrency is a good example, and how people, the governments are stepping into that, how you cross borders with this technology, like there's these wall gardens, with the United States and Huawei in China, just like there's kind of two internets of in the West and China. Those are going to be areas. So yeah, I could have, spent, 15, 20 minutes, or you could, actually that would probably be a good presentation for you guys to talk about all those areas. And then of course you have security, privacy, identity are huge areas that you've written very well about. How do we deal with identity, with this technology? How do we have safety and security, to make it, because, the internet was bad. There's dark places of the internet right now. As we go into this immersive technology, there will be dark places of the immersive technology as well. How do we make this a safe place for students, for young people, for the vulnerable, for those who, like there was just recently an article about this woman felt molested in VR, Facebook's
Totally.
Meta, and how do we, because my rule of thumb is I don't like to be within, in VR, I try to stay the same distance as I would to a real, in the physical world. So, stay 2 to 3 feet away from someone who I don't know well. Though, by the way, I went into the VR with a friend, and we were with actually workplaces. A good platform is workplaces, because your avatar, you can really engage and feel like you're connected with people. And we were, but 4 guys of us, we were doing stuff, and we started punching each other, and we were like just a bunch of 10-year-olds playing, but because we knew each other. And then a lady friend of mine, she gave me a hug, and there's a sensation, but I would only get a hug from someone I knew well, right? So it's kind of like there's this sensation of this immersive experience. It can be used for good, or it can be used for bad. That's where, like, Alvin Graylin and others are focused on how do we use this technology for good and not for bad.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you said. I have nothing. The only thing I could say about identity is a way to sum it up is that legal identity is a bitch, because we have archaic human laws in each jurisdiction. We have no ability today to identify an AI system or bot legally around the planet, and that is a major Walker problem. But I'll shut up. It's a great presentation, Doug.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. I just might add, Doug, that one of the things that's currently missing that I miss, right, that I've seen early indications of in places like MIT Media Lab is, affective expression, right, in the avatars, is that I can't read a lot from the faces right now. And, there needs to be, a little bit of improvement, because the emotional integrity of the space will improve when you have some affective computing reading your real face and interpreting that in the metaverse.
Absolutely. And in fact, they're working on that, because like these devices, they have 6 cameras. So if you put it on, they actually are trying to read your lips. In fact, there's AI technology that actually gives, tries to say, okay, how do we duplicate this physical emotion virtually? I would say the one thing is, you have different versions of your avatar, right? One version is to try to match you as much as it's almost like, it's just like a video, like you're seeing me right now. Though sometimes, when I try to do that kind of avatar, it's like, wow, I look a little scary. There's this uncanny valley, maybe it's because I'm old. But there's this kind of, and then there's the cartoon avatars that are kind of wild, and then there's this kind of intermediate. In fact, I joke that people on average are especially if they're in their 40s and 50s, they're 25 pounds lighter than their physical appearance and 25 years younger than their physical appearance. And
residual self-image.
Yeah. So you look like you're always 28, right? But in some ways, it makes you feel a little bit better about yourself, especially if you're kind of it's like, okay, here's my ideal self, and how do I want to show the world who I am, right? And like going back to this fashion industry, that's actually half the revenue of these game industries are from people buying clothes in the metaverse for their avatars. So they want to personify themselves. So I think you'll find that people will like to turn on their video camera more if they can have their avatar and they can control what they look like, right? Both their size and weight and age a little bit more, so they can, it's like, okay, I just woke up and I look horrible. Well, I turn on my avatar and I have this filter, and I filter myself to be looking younger and maybe a little bit less, have less weight, and I put the clothes on I want in the virtual world, right? So these are going to be interesting transitions, how people spend in the virtual world, how they spend in the physical world going forward. In fact, I skipped through the slides about this physical world, about e-commerce, but right now, what is it, about close to $4 trillion of e-commerce of 16 trillion out there. So what is that, about 25%? And, e-commerce getting bigger and bigger, and then in the digital world as well.
You could probably sell those, filters here that are just backgrounds today to Zoom immediately, right? People would pay a lot of money to look better, right?
Right. Yeah, that you have AI and you say, okay, I want to filter this. I look 20 years, or maybe 20 is too far, but maybe 10 years younger or 10 pounds lighter, kind of.
So we had some other questions and comments. Our own Lynn Wells. Lynn, you got your hand up. Let's go.
My question actually involves haptics, which we talk about a lot of things, but I mean, one of our sons made the point that when the cost of virtual reality drops below the cost of dating, society ends. And so this question is, what happens when you superimpose haptics on top of all this other reality?
Right. More and more immersive experiences, right? So right now we have sight pretty well. I mean, this new technology is getting, in fact, the FDA has a really good report on, how good is your sight and when is sight, where you can't tell the difference between the virtual and physical world. And that's going to be done in the next, actually, they already have devices now, but they're, in the $8,000 range. And then you have sound, and sound is going to continue to get better and better. In fact, there's a telehealth organization. They say, that the hearing aid industry is going to be completely disrupted because everyone's going to have these smart sound devices that are better than the hearing aids, and they cost a lot less. So they're working on that technology in telehealth. But then you go down to touch, right? And how touch is so important. Like I talked about this when my friend hugged me. There was, even though I didn't have any sensation to that, just that in the workplace, I felt like I was, I kind of felt that connection with her. So this will get, and then when you actually have a bodysuit that you get the sensations, but the challenge will be is how do we still keep real relationships in the physical world and in the digital worlds, right? The virtual worlds. And I would argue you can have very real relationships like we have right now. I think what we're doing today is very real, even though it's digital. You can have very superficials in the physical world, right? So, it's not whether you're in the physical, digital, virtual worlds, is whether it's actual meaningful. In fact, Caitlin Krauss, she talks about meaningful relationships. She has a company called Mindwise, and all her focus is around, as you go into this virtual worlds, how do you have these meaningful relationships? And then I would argue, if you have those meaningful relationships, biology will kick in. And, we want to have kids. We want to have, the next generation. We want to be educators. We want to be teachers. And so I would argue that, if we do this technology right, hopefully we'll have, a more meaningful, connected world.
There's an interesting commercial running for, I don't know if it's AT&T or somebody, but it's this hug jacket. Basically, just, in one case, this guy left his brother in Nicaragua 20 years ago and they haven't seen each other since. And so they ship each other this jacket with sensors on it and they can hug each other. Anyway, so it's kind of getting there.
Kevin, you're muted.
Thank you. I was being considerate, and then, you can't hear me. Pat Scannell, you had some comments in chat.
Oh, come on now, Kevin, don't pick on me. I was just up in the stands shouting at the man in the ring just to feel like I just wanted Doug to feel the love. No, I literally could spend about 3 or 4 hours talking about the subjects that Doug has covered. I am so excited to see him presenting them to this group and to see the interactions. And I know a number of you quite well on these subjects, but I'm gonna reserve comment until later. Doug, I can't tell you more. I can't tell you how much I keep thinking about how the metaverse will change the fundamental nature of humanity and how it will exacerbate the fundamental defining characteristics of humanity and amplify those in both good and bad ways. But that's my only comment from the cheap seats, because I literally could talk about that for a few hours. So Kevin, that's all I've got for now.
Yeah.
right?
Well,
One of the things that I would just say, Doug, is that we have a thread going on here which says that there's probably a larger, longer discussion that could potentially get prompted. That we might want to take it somewhere. I'll talk to you about that later.
I'm happy to do that. I mean, I left Nokia actually because I wanted to be immersed in the technology, and I thought.
Wait! Don't bury the lead. What? Doug, are you no longer with Nokia?
Yeah, I left them in December. I decided I wanted to. I'm doing work with universities and other things, so I actually left Nokia. Even though I was working on the job I was doing, the department, I couldn't find the right fit, so I decided to leave Nokia.
So for those of you who don't know, my commercial work is heavily involved with Samsung, but I'm an independent contractor. I consult, and I always felt there was a conflict of interest if Doug and I were to collaborate more. And the nature of his what my academic researchers call empirical research, and my empirical research, which is on the side of the commercial work that we do, is outside of the academia that most of you that have PhDs typically pursue. So Doug, the fact that you've left Nokia unlocks the opportunity for you and I perhaps to collaborate a little bit more.
Oh, I'd be happy to do that. I'm excited. And Pat, I do appreciate you introducing me to this group. If I look at positive engagements, you brought me to this group, and just so I found it so positive. To your point that you just gave, one of my friends, he actually went to Harvard Law School. And when I was talking about autonomous vehicles, the Magnificent Anderson's written in 1918. It's about cars, but I translated this to Metaverse. Cars are such a nuisance, a useless nuisance, and now the Metaverse is a useless nuisance. And they said the quote is they're going to alter war and they're going to alter peace. And I think men's and women's minds are going to be changed in significant ways because of the Metaverse. Right? Will they add to the beauties of men's and women's souls? Right? And so that's the question. The one other thing I just wanted to highlight, I skipped it over, but again, this group is fantastic. I met Gary Bowles through this group. And one thing the Metaverse can give you is meaningful connections. One thing to take away is find meaningful connections through the digital and physical world. Is what's life, in my opinion, is what life's about. So Gary Bowles, I'm part of this group that has a book club. Pat talked at this club as well. We meet on Wednesdays, 8:00 Central Time. Gary's going to be going over his book. We already had the first talk on Wednesday the next time. In fact, we're going to, one day we're going to go into the virtual world using Spatial I/O. It's actually a really good platform. Even if you don't have an Oculus, you can do it just in your PC, and it works pretty well. So we're going to be talking about the future of work, and actually Gary's going to also have some things about the future of education. There's coming up his Global Skills Day. 2022, but how books become a wikis and living document, books becoming spatial and immersive, is something that work will never be the same again. He actually has this really good report out on the future of work and how people are going from, especially the knowledge workers are going from working in an office to working at home, and the value of that. So I just wanted to point out those 2 points. But again, Pat, thank you so much for introducing me to this group. Significant value, and also introducing me to Gary, this group, because just really been enjoying working with Gary with this book club and the future of work.
Great. Ryan Cameron, you had some comments in chat. Join us.
Hello.
Hi, Brian.
Oh, hey, I just think you can't really have a conversation about a people-centered internet without talking about privacy and neural sovereignty and security, and also health and safety in this XR environment. I'm in the healthcare space with XR, and we're doing quite a bit of research in the area of what is unique to XR, where bad actors could intentionally or unintentionally cause harm to people in ways that they couldn't in other contexts. So like when you have someone's head inside a VR helmet, you've completely got their all their senses distracted from what's going on in reality. So you could cause them to stumble, you could cause them to, engage in activities that might cause repetitive stress injuries. You can traumatize them, in addition to all the great things you can do with healthcare and VR. So my group has been exploring how to protect people in this new world, as well as protecting their privacy and neural sovereignty. So I just wonder if you have any comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information on that. In fact, there's I think it's in March, early March, talking about there's in Vanderbilt, and unfortunately it's not virtual, it's only physical. But it's out. And Cameron, if you send me, I'll put my email on chat. But if you send me that, I can send you some information about talking about that. In fact, I invested in a company called Open Water last year. That is brain-machine interface kind of technology. Now they're trying to detect stroke, so looking at LiDAR technology, but they think they can read neural networks and figure out emotions and what you're thinking. Because in fact, there's a company that's called Effectiva. They actually got bought by another company, but they would look at your face and identify 25 emotions. Right. So, how can I look at my emotions and then read those and then manipulate them? Right. And just like the AI algorithms trying to manipulate you to watch these shows to make you angry more, or, keep watching a news show that makes you angry and mad at the other side. So instead of a people-centered world, we're having an angry world, right? And so these are the challenges. So my argument to that world, that dark world, is how do we show light, right? There's a dark world and then there's a world of light. And I want to promote a world of light and helping with abundance for all and engagement and where there's the positive emotions of humanity and not the negatives.
Hey, Kevin, can I jump back in? This is Pat Scannell.
Sure.
So I just got off a phone call with a friend of mine who has been up for a Nobel Prize a couple times, and he and I are arguably the two leading researchers on the future of thought. And in response to what Doug just said, I would say that the nature of technology is the ability to understand human intentions, state, conditions much better than humans understand themselves. If not today, then in the near future, whether it's 6 months or 6 years from now. So the ability for technology to interpret the cessating of the eyes. So it's not just the micro expression that Doug is experiencing today, but the cessating of where the pupil focus of his eyes go in a conversation to the text or context in which he's operating. So the ability of technology to understand and interpret that is extraordinarily powerful. And we have to, as humans, understand how we can harness that, not only to understand how to operate to achieve our own individual interests in the world, but how to interoperate with others. So I might meet with Doug and understand that Doug is, pardon me, fatally ill and interested in a hedonistic issue and not at all interested in what I'm talking about right now, all based upon my use of technology's ability to interpret Doug's face and the physical symptoms and even to the level of the biome and the chemistry of what he's exuding. And I might be able to understand that better than Doug is able to understand himself. So as we extrapolate to this idea of, and this is why I passed earlier, because I could spend a lot of time thinking about this, in the metaverse, we have to consider about how the fabric of our ability to think changes when we have a fundamentally different ability to understand the people who we're interacting with. So I'm not just talking about, Kevin, your complaints about emojis or avatars' lack of facial expressions. I'm saying technology of the avatar is one thing, but the technology of the positing individual. I mean, there's so much robustness there, and I don't know that we've begun to really contemplate the consequences of all this.
Yeah.
Sorry, Doug. Kevin,
Well,
feel free
yeah.
to walk that back.
100% agree with what you're saying, Doug. I just want to do a little interruption from and then you pick up the thread. It's the bottom of the hour, all right? And so for those of you who have to depart, we thank you for joining us. We're going into our Q&A overtime, all right? So we'll be going right to the 1 o'clock Eastern, top of the hour. So thanks for being with us. And Doug, Pat made some very interesting observations there, all right? That we could know ourselves better than we know ourselves, today, because we're going to have more telemetry about that.
Exactly. Yeah, you have your digital twin. Like I think one thing about the metaverse will be you have a digital representation of your physical world, either a factory or your home or yourself, right? And I joke that I need a donut like I need heroin, because fortunately I'm not as big. Actually, brownies or cake is my downfall. But so I know I shouldn't be eating things, especially later at night. But it's my downfall. So can I, how do I, get my focus away from the bad things in the world that I know to get into good things? And that's why we pay money to have people have our physical coaches, work coaches, those kind of things. So again, how do we use technology that benefits humanity and ourselves and doesn't, the angry AI that keeps us addicted to all the bad things of humanity, whether it's drugs, addiction, or internet addiction, and all the other bad things of society. So yeah, Pat, this future of thought, I something I'm very interested in, and like I actually reached out to Effectiva, this company that looks at the 24 motions out there. And the danger is okay. So actually they did Effectiva. They did a study that said. They tried it on Chinese people, and they found if there were another person in the room, the Chinese person was a good poker face. Now I don't have a good poker face; I'm pretty bad at that. But you can probably read my emotions fairly well. But the Chinese, they're very good at hiding their emotions. And then if there was no one else in the room, then all of a sudden their emotions start coming out on their face. So the thing is now with this technology like brain-computer interface. That's even passive, right? There's passive technology that will read your face, read your eyes, read some of your neural networks. Where's your brain lighting up, right? And these are the danger of our society. It can be used for good or bad. It can be saying like, okay, those potato chips are lighting up your brain. Maybe what you need to do is go do something healthy instead, right? But these are the challenges of this technology and how they use the technology for good and not to control humanity.
Yeah, excellent. We had a comment by Mike Wing. Mike, are you with us? Hi, Mike.
Yeah, I was just offering a marketing pun. So, from the iPhone to the iPhone. I would my only comment would be that this radical intensification of sensory, cognitive, physical awareness, is moving at exponential speeds, and evolution isn't. I don't know whether that's good or bad, but it certainly will produce attention. The critter that is using and subject of these sets of capabilities is not going to evolve biologically anything like as fast as the technology. I don't know where that goes, but it's definitely, it obviously won't all be benign. It won't all be dystopian. I don't think we can know how that event horizon plays out.
Yeah, that's fantastic insight. I mean, if you think about when they invented the car in 1900s, right? It's going to alter war, it's going to alter peace, and men's minds are going to change because of it. Unfortunately, like right now, 1.35 million people die on the road every year. 50 million people go to a hospital every year because of car accidents, right? And so how many people are going to die because of this immersive technology versus how many people are going to be helped? And what can we do since this technology is coming? I mean, in some ways, it's going to be hard to shut it down. How do you adjust to it? And it's not just the metaverse, but it's AI as well. The advertiser is going to be more than happy to stimulate your brain and make you happy or mad so that you keep hooked on this heroin, this digital heroin, right?
Well,
And
and it's also the case that the phenomena we're talking about are largely, at least as far as I understand it, technologically, largely solipsistic experiences, whereas the needs we have are at least social, if not more ecological. And so, how is this technology going to evolve with this level of radical cognitive complexity and immediacy and sensory immediacy and environmental interconnection and systemic, emergent evolution? I don't know how that plays out either.
well, so in China, they said, okay, kids can only use so many hours. They really locked down the amount of gaming that they can do now on the internet, right? So they tend to be authoritarian, so they can do that. I don't know what the response to Chinese society, because what had happened about 6 months ago. I don't know if anyone has any insight into that, but what do kids do now that they can't play games, right? How has it made their lives better? Would be some of my questions. Like, you have these natural experiments, right? Of what's going on in China, what's going on in Europe, what's going on in the United States and around the world. And, every country, every culture exploring how to deal with this technology and, see what the good is and see what the bad is and try to get rid of the bad and amplify the good.
Okay. Ben Kaczynski.
Hi, folks. Really great engagement, and I had to do so while I was going to the Apple store to genuflect on a Sunday afternoon, but I very much appreciate. As one who's spent a lot of time, and I certainly have Quest 2 and work have done work in the meta space, but early lessons from the early days of Habbo Hotel and the Second Life. I still have my island in Second Life that that David Bray and I put together in 2007. So 15 years ago, there was a lot of work going on in studying behaviors of how people behave and translate their behaviors, like the elevator effect you were talking about. When you go into an elevator, you don't stand right next to somebody. Well, how does that translate into these virtual environments? And also statistics that we had then, I'm curious as to how much they translate now. Less than 8% of the people gender switched in the avatar. In cases where there were furry avatars available, some 20% of people elected to be furries. And other things like that. It'd be interesting to look at those early days 15 years ago and how they translated over. And by the way, I took President Carter in 2008. His people called and wanted me to come by because I'd had lunch with him a number of times, and he wanted to go into virtual worlds. He was very curious about the prospect there. And I also don't know what happened with Hype High in China. There was a clone of Second Life done there. their spec said 151 million simultaneous people in world. There's the specs for the scaling of their system. So I think there are a lot of instances from those sort of pre-dawn OG days that might be interesting to look at comparison, contrasting, and what might have changed as we step forward now. Thanks.
Oh, fantastic insight there. Yeah, I like your comment about the 8% gender switch, because in one sense you can be more free to do things, right? You can be furry if you want, right?
People thought there would be a higher percentage of people that would gender switch. And also the furries too thought that would be a natural attraction to be something different and comfortable from what you are. But in fact, it was interesting how people chose their avatars, and also most of us, and I still have a portfolio of about 10 avatars in my second life. My island's still there if you want to come.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Well, so that's why I try to identify myself as Surfer Doug, and I try to keep that consistent across all the virtual platforms. In fact, go ahead.
That's an excellent point. I use region tension, and I try to use it in every world I go into, and try to preserve it so that people don't grab that identity.
Very good. I'll just mention, Ben, Doug, that built an entire IBM pavilion in Second Life, right? But I let other people go. I was not particularly interested in being there myself. All right. But there was an entire community.
There were about 4 or 5 IBM islands.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, and the research community at IBM used it for some very purposeful ways at the time. I was so involved in what was going on in the physical component of that program that I didn't have time to be in the Second Life piece. But like I said, it was a matter of delegation. Jeanette, you had some comments in chat. We're delighted to have you with us.
Hi, everyone. It's really trying to figure out the legal aspect of, protection against crime. Then also we have the governments who are going to have their own data protection. And we have finally, the different compliance requirements, which we have with hardware everywhere. And are we talking now that, as somebody mentioned already, that we're going to have metaverse walls the way we have internet walls?
Well, like right now you have actually, they call it, these wall gardens, so Oculus is, doing Meta, or so it's no longer Oculus, is actually Meta / Facebook, has their platform. Apple's supposed to come out and they'll probably use their platform. In China, they'll have their platforms, so there'll be different platforms from companies' perspective. And then there's country platforms, right? How do you, just like in China, there's, different, rules of the internet versus here in the West. And so, this is kind of going to become what of a Wild West where people are trying to figure this out. How do you have property rights in the metaverse? How do you have identity, cryptocurrency, blockchain? All these things are going to be sorted out. So, they're working on standards to make this easier and more transparent. But, there's also companies that want to say, hey, I want to control this niche of the metaverse and to maximize my profit, just like the internet, right? You have, Google and Facebook and others that are trying to do, Apple, to have more control and maximize their profits. And these are going to be the challenges.
Yeah, you're also getting some help in chat from some other folks who are pointing to resources.
Yeah.
And having managed about a third of IBM's intellectual property at one point, I'll just say that intellectual property law is going to need to catch up with, quote unquote, ownership or ideas in this space, because, it very much has some grounding in other areas. And I'm not sure that just the typical patent law and copyright fully embraces all the things that we're about to do. So
Yeah, Guy should be answering this question because my focus is communication and devices.
I understand. I mean, Guy, do you want to jump in again?
Oh, silly Kevin.
I'm not really sure where to begin. Pat, I was just writing you a note. I said, to be honest, I'm sick of writing about things. I'm sick of being the futurist. I simply want to find a jurisdiction and work with them. I'm a guy who likes leading practical teams. And this stuff requires the ability to fund a jurisdiction with a lot of dough and do it. And it's going to be a terrible project because there's going to be all sorts of reasons why we can't do it. But the laws are the starting point. The tech isn't the problem. The tech's creating the problem, but we have to rethink our laws. And the laws can't just be in the state of Texas or Georgia or North Carolina where you are. It has to be around the planet. And that is a bitch to solve because all the provinces and states are going to say, F you, I don't want to change my laws. And it's a real problem. And it's not at the national level because legal identity is at the state provincial level. So I think, oh my God, it's like a whopper problem.
Yeah, I mean, it requires kind of a uniform commercial code approach, right, where it's distributed, but there are some things that we all agree, and therefore we adopt the legislation, across a wide, number of territories. But
I really agree with you.
Yeah, I would comment that right now, U.S. law, how we do the internet there, with the 1990s law of telecommunication, but a lot of times they go back to, how the train laws of the 1920s law and try to apply that to the internet. It's like, wow, interstate commerce and so forth. So yeah, we need to completely revisit the laws. Unfortunately, the last thing I think our politicians today can do is to make those changes. I mean, I
agree.
No,
but having said all of
templates, you can give them templates to work from. I worked on the early cable television legislation, and you give the state legislatures templates. Go ahead, Jeanette.
I wanted to say that we have, a few decades on the internet where all of these issues have come up and we still haven't solved them. So it makes sense now that we're moving to the metaverse, that we've learned from those lessons and we start, building the metaverse with these issues in mind, which we didn't do for the internet.
Okay, very good.
Can I leap in one more time?
Sure, okay.
Guy, it's so funny because I wanted to leap in too, so I'm going to shut up because I'm so excited to see.
I'll just be a second, Pat. So, Jeanette, I wrote a revised laws of identity, which I put in the chat, and that is the starting point that I think that all policymakers and business leaders around the planet should read, and that is beginning of working towards a template that you mentioned. So that's what we have to work at. We have to work at very basic stuff, create fundamental agreement, which we can create, which is really what your presentation was about, Doug. Like, how can we create a good world? And we have to have underlying principles, laws that we use to start with. And Amish, go ahead,
Okay.
Pat.
Pat, you want to jump in?
No, I know we're in overtime here in terms of the soccer metaphor or whatever, but Guy and I are in fundamental agreement in a lot of different areas. The thing that I would disagree with Guy, and I think respectfully, is that this isn't an issue of legislation that needs to occur. This isn't an issue of ethical companies like Tristan Harris would and Perry and others would tell us to focus on. This is an issue of how we fundamentally as humans consume and adopt technology. The driver of technology is the things that we ask for. So I'm trying to figure out at the ground level, how do we help us as humans interact with technology in ways that leave us better off? So I guess what I'm simply saying is that as we look to people like Guy to forecast the future of legislation, and by the way, his work is the most brilliant I've seen in the world on this issue, and yet gets very little attention. I also want to ask us as people to begin to think about our role, our agency in these systems. How do we interact with technologies in a way that create the technologies that we interact with? So I know that's a little bit of abstract for most, but I guess Guy might appreciate that, and perhaps Doug would understand where I'm going with that.
Well, great comment.
Yeah. I mean, there's a big difference between having a culture that's supportive of the positive aspects, where legislation is generally to avoid the negatives, right? It's to provide a framework to keep, and most laws come into effect because of misbehavior. If you're already, operating normatively the right way toward each other, you don't need a law. In any event, Beatrice. You had some comments in chat.
Hi. Yes, I'm trying to turn on my camera, but I don't think I'm capable.
And Bruce, I see your hand. I'll be right with you. Go ahead. Beatrice,
okay, my camera is not working, but you can hear me. That's good.
We can see
so
you now.
Hi. So the comment I was making was about how we train this artificial intelligence that reads emotions, also to go away from the people who are creating it, so that we cover the whole spectrum of inclusion in the world. So there's just cultural aspects to emotions. There's like maybe different aspects reading emotions from a person depending on the race, or women may react differently than men, or also people with different disabilities or neurodiversity. So it was just a thought that I had, that always when creating these new technologies, if we forget about that, we're going to have the troubles in the future. Something like what happened with the internet. At the beginning, it was accessible, and then in the future, it got worse and worse the more we were adding stuff on top of it to make it look nicer or be more attractive.
Yeah, a book, Girl Decoded, by the founder of Effectiva. She's from actually Egypt originally, and she writes about the different cultures and this technology and how you evaluate emotions. Going, I got one of my best friends, she's from Argentina, and how she relates to the world and how I relate to the world. You got, just like translate English to Spanish, you need to translate Doug's emotions to my friend Susanna's emotions.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. That answer your question?
Yes, I guess it's an open question that we need to take into account for the future.
100%.
Yeah.
So we're coming right up to the top of the hour, and to capstone, we're going to hear from Bruce. Bruce, you're on mute, sir. Bruce, you're on mute.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, got it. Doug, thank you very much for this presentation. I think it was absolutely wonderful. But as I listen in on this, one of the things that we are really addressing, or looking at least, is the underlying human consciousness. And until that begins to shift, I'm not certain, Beatrice just touched upon that as well, as we keep building upon something, trying to fix something. And I don't know how we really work around that, because we're creating something that is fundamentally mutated from our underlying human consciousness. And it's a real threat to all of us. If we can't figure out how we can do this in a more constructive way, I just don't know how it's all going to end. I'm afraid that, the metaverse, as much as we would all love to have that be a great and new world, I'm very, very concerned that it's not going to turn out that way.
Yeah, well, I go back to people-centered internet, people-centered metaverse. What is your foundation? If the foundation is, I want to be people-centered, right? And then I put on top of that all this great technology, that's good. But if your foundation is, I want to control my society, or I want to make lots of money, and I don't care if it makes a lot of people angry, depressed, suicidal, whatever. As long as I'm making money, I'm fine. Those are bad things. So I go back to basic principles. It's like, what's the most important thing? And it needs to be people-centered and not focusing on making money or being authoritarian.
I agree with you, Doug. I just don't know how the hell we get there.
Well, you groups like this that promote people-centered philosophy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you again, Doug.
Thank you.
Bruce, thank you. And so Doug, we're ending on time.
Yeah.
This is great. Doug, thank you so much for bringing your expertise. You clearly have some other experts that recognize yours here. So that is that's always a great thing. There's likely a continuing conversation that could be had. So I'm going to kind of set some time aside for us to have that conversation because I think that there's some energy for that. So we'll talk about it. And I hope everyone has a spectacular Sunday, what's left of it, wherever you are in the world. I don't have a forecast of who's going to be on the call next because we're going through some reorganization, as I mentioned right at the top of the call. But with that said, we're looking forward to having a great speaker in 2 weeks. And at everything you folks do, be intentional. We'll see you on our next Sunday call. Doug, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Cheers,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye now.